Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Dan. I'm the Chief Operating Officer and Head of Tutoring here at Bespoke Education. So pleased to have you with us this evening for our webinar on solving the early admissions and early application puzzle. Before we get started, before I welcome our presenters, I'm just going to say a few quick words about Bespoke Education and what services we offer for those of you who are unfamiliar with us. So we're going to share our website. Here we go. First of all, we do a lot of test preparation. This is where the company began. And for those of you who are on the college journey, you probably have some questions about that. We'll touch on it slightly in today's webinar, but this is what we've been doing for 20 plus years. So if you have any questions, please just call us. We work on the college tests, the high school tests, grad school tests, really pretty much any standardized test that you can think of. We've got experts there to help you out. Looking at that, we just know tutoring really well. We have been tutoring and investigating what it means to be a good tutor, to be a good coach, a mentor, and how tutoring is the crux of all of those things. So we have really figured out how we can help students at any point in their academic journey, not just with the test prep, but with their academics, with specific subjects, and with executive function, with the cognitive skills that they need to support the invisible curriculum that they're trying to learn all the way throughout their schooling years. So if you're curious about that, we've got a great webinar on it. It's on our website, and we'd love to answer your questions. So please do be in touch. A service we're really happy with, really excited about these days is our Bespoke Education Access Program, where we are in partnership with schools, with public schools, with private schools, and with non-school organizations to get our instruction and our expertise to the students who need it most. It's really exciting. We've expanded these partnerships, I would say, 10 times in the last year. It's a huge area of growth and real excitement for us. Not only that, we're actually offering tutor training to volunteer tutors so our expertise can reach even more students. Then, and lastly for today, we do a lot of work in the college guidance and college counseling realm. That's what we're here to talk about tonight, but those services extend beyond just our counselors. We do college essays, we do sample interviews, we do advising for your academics on what kinds of classes you should take. We're going to get to all of that tonight. So that's a good segue to why we are here. We are in the moment. Early admissions, early action, early decision deadlines are in less than a month. So we're really excited to have you join us for this webinar. And to get us started, I'm going to welcome our panelists, Sarah Hartman and Antoine Hart. Please join me, guys. Great. It's good to see you. Thank you so much for being here tonight, for working on this webinar with me, for having these comments and this wisdom for our attendees. Let's get us started just with a brief introduction. Sarah, then Antoine, can you guys just share a little bit about your academic journey and what you're working on with your students these days?
Absolutely. So first of all, welcome everybody. So pleased to have us all here together in the Zoom room. So I grew up in Wyoming. I went to college at Barnard College of Columbia University. I studied theater. And after I graduated, I started working in the admissions office at Barnard. I was there for about 3 years. And while I was working in admissions, I was also getting my master's degree from Teachers College of Columbia, with a focus both in theater's role in higher education, but also on college readiness, degree attainment, and just the whole higher education experience, particularly from that admissions point of view. And after I graduated from there, I went off to start a PhD program that I abandoned, not quite the scholarship journey I wanted to continue. But while I was doing that, I kept reading admissions applications for Barnard. So even when I wasn't in the office, I was still an admissions reader, reading their admit applications. And then I've been with Bespoke since 2019, doing college counseling work, and I'm so thrilled to be here now with you all.
Thank you, Sarah. Antoine?
Yes, thank you so much. And welcome, everyone. We're super excited to have you join us today. Super excited to share some of our knowledge. I am a son of New York. I grew up on Long Island before attending the George Washington University on a basketball scholarship. After working at the George Washington University, I chased the dream of playing basketball overseas, where I played professionally for a couple of years. And then I returned to the admissions office at George Washington University, or GW, as we're affectionately known, where I led a massive student group of about 200 students, where they would conduct tours and panels and answer questions and work in the admissions office. I also worked with veterans on the Yellow Ribbon program, helping veterans sort of continue their education. And then I logistically organized overnight visits for students that would visit campus. In addition to that, I did some DEI work with George Washington University before I moved over to the Lawrenceville Prep School in New Jersey. Where there, I also had my hand in various things, including coaching. But one of the things I'm most proud of was the Explore Lawrenceville program, where we would bring colleges onto campus to meet with our students. We would have a small college fair, but we would also allow them to meet with our administrators and sort of sit in class and learn what Hartman learning is all about and see the students in action. After Lawrenceville, I landed here at Bespoke. I was at Lawrenceville for about 11 years and 11 months. And then I joined Bespoke, and I've been here for about 3 to 4 months now as we sort of evolve into this Bespoke Education 3.0, where we're growing and maturing and we're building. And so it's an exciting time to be a part of the company right now.
Great. Thank you both so much. This is big news for us, as Antoine is our first full-time director of college counseling. We're really excited to see where he takes Bespoke, and also where he takes content and programming like this, with a lot of expertise and a lot of wisdom to share with everyone. So a couple logistics before we dive in. There is a poll. Please answer it. And once you're done, you can X out of it. That just gives us a good sense of who is here. This is a live webinar, so we're going to kind of tilt things as we go, depending on who's here in the audience. Another piece of that is your interaction options. You've got a Q&A and a chat. The Q&A is seen by everybody. You can post anonymously if you would like, and please do post questions there as they occur to you. Once again, this is live, so we're going to try to incorporate the answers to your questions into our remarks. We also might type some answers if those are relatively straightforward. The chat goes directly to us, to the panelists, and it won't be seen by the other folks who are here as attendees. So if there's something that you'd like a private question to let us know, that's a great way of doing it. We would, in general, encourage you to use the Q&A just because it is more public and it does contribute to the sense of community that we're trying to build here. So where are we headed today? We are going to talk about a couple things. We're going to, as we have said, try to solve the early applications puzzle. But how are we doing that? We are going to first talk about a little bit of our philosophy. There are many different ways of approaching the college process and the college admissions process. And when you're thinking about who do you want to talk to, it's important to make sure you're talking to people who've got some similar philosophy to what you're interested in. So that's important to get out of the way right up front. We're going to talk about terms, definitions, outcomes, and calendars for the early applications and also for later on in the process, because it all works together. We're going to talk about what you need in terms of the things that should be on your list as you look into senior fall, or for the junior families out there, as you think about what's going to be up in about a year from now for you. And then lastly, we're going to get around to timelines for students in each grade, 9th and 10th, 11th and 12th. What are the things that you should be thinking about at this point in your journey? So as a segue to what's the goal here? Obviously, the goal overall is to get into college, but there are a lot of ways to get there. And I think I'll start us off with a question for Antoine and then a similar one for Sarah. What do you see as a through line for your work? You've worked on this from the college side, from the high school side, now working here at Bespoke. There are some commonalities, and that's partly why we hired you. What do you see as those commonalities or those threads that tie it all together?
Thank you, Dan. Yes, there are a lot of commonalities, but I think the one that the family should understand is that everyone working in college admissions and college counseling was sort of in this help community, right? We like to help others. We want to support others. We want to be there for others. And so in the college process is exactly the same thing. I got into this work because I enjoyed working with families. I enjoyed working with students. On the high school side, I was sort of talking to them, and then on the college side, I was talking to them, and on the high school side, I was working directly with them, not only on the college process, but also as a coach. On the high school side and as an independent counselor, it's really easy to see how we're trying to work with and help the students. We're guiding them through this process. We're making sure they have all the tools they need. But and as you can see there, we're trying to find the right match for the students. And so we're supporting the students through this process. On the college side, it might be a little bit harder, but they are also working to help the students. They want to make sure the students that find the right match, the right community, the right school, the right academic profile for their particular school. And so they're going to try to decipher from all the information they receive, is this student strong for us academically? And then will the student be happy here? Will they be engaged? Will they be successful? Those are all the questions they will ask when they're trying to shape their community and their class. And so they're also trying to help students. If they feel like you're not going to be if you're not going to be happy or successful, then there's a good chance that they'll say, hey, this is probably not the right community for you. For example, if you want a big rah-rah, super engaged athletic college, and their school doesn't offer a ton of athletics or a lot of the rah-rah, then that's probably not the right community. When I went to college, I was engaged in community service. George Washington University was well known for their community service projects. And so beyond basketball and beyond the academic fit for me, it was great as far as the community fit was concerned.
Sarah, how about you? What do you see as what you're focused on, what you can bring to your students in this work?
So I think probably my favorite way of describing working in college counseling with Bespoke is that it is truly the most bespoke part of Bespoke. So, the paths towards college and the paths through the admissions process is as unique as every student who comes to us. And I really love that about the process, that, we really meet the students and the families exactly where they are. And that both means in terms of their timeline through the process, but also in terms of what it is exactly that they're looking for in terms of support. So that can look like anything from, soup to nuts, talking you through all of the details of the process, or also just stepping in to kind of give students the emotional support to get through this big life event that they're doing. And part of it, one of the things, also I still work in theater, sort of my parallel career, that it's also the storytelling piece of it. That one of the big things that I talk to families and students about is, what is the story that you are presenting to admissions with your application? And all the different parts and pieces of the application are in conversation with each other. And so looking at it in this holistic way and saying, let's tell this awesome story of you, even for the students out there who think, well, I don't know what my thing is. Well, let's talk and we'll figure out what your thing is, because I know you've got one. So I really find that fulfilling as part of this journey with my kids.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this is a big piece of our work since the beginning. It's in the name. We're bespoke. We're trying to figure out what your student needs. And that's so important for college, to remember that just because a school has the best or the most recognizable name or whatever it is, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the place to aim for. That's the place to stake your dreams on. There's more to it than that. And it's really important in this process to dig into that. So let's get down to it. Early applications, early admissions, there is a lot going on, a lot of terms to get into. Antoine, I'm going to share my screen again. I'm going to give it to you first to kind of walk us through the map of terms. What do we need to know about all these things that we're hearing?
Excellent. So the first thing everyone should know is college counseling is almost like its own language. And so there are terms that you need to know when applying, and particularly in applying early. And we're trying to solve this puzzle. And so early decision would be one that you should know right away. Consider early decision. We also sometimes call it ED or ED1. So if you hear Sarah and I say ED or ED1, we're talking about early decision. Think of it as a binding, or think of it as a contract. You actually have to sign a document from the student, the parent, and the high school counselor, basically stating, if admitted to this particular college, that you will go and you will withdraw all other applications. And so in this case, if you're admitted, you're committed, if you're admitted ED or early decision, you're committing to go to that university. Early action is almost the opposite. Early action, you get to apply, but it's non-binding. There's no contract. You can get the admit and hold on to that admit all the way through to the spring. In May, you have to make a decision. And at that point, you can look at all of your admits and decide on where you want to go. You can apply early decision and early action, but understand that if you get in ED, you have to go. Restrictive early action is sort of a hybrid. they restrict where you can apply. So they will say you cannot apply to a private school, you cannot apply to an early decision school. The reason why they do this is they want to be an option. Georgetown is an example of this. They're restrictive early action. They say, hey, you can get this admit from Georgetown. You don't have to say you want to go right now. Wait until the spring. Look at all of your admits. But we want to make sure in the spring we are a choice. Rolling admissions, this is usually some of the state schools, some international schools, where they will allow you to apply when the application opens, and they will make decisions in batches. And so that first batch, they'll make decisions on all those students. They'll push them aside and get a second batch, and they'll keep making decisions until they fill all of their campuses and all of their majors. The one important thing to remember with rolling admissions is that the earlier you get in, the greater your chances of being admitted. And what I mean by that is with rolling admissions, if you wait until late in the process, they may have filled up your major, or they may have filled up the specific campus you want to attend. And so with rolling admissions, it's best to get it in early. It's not an early decision. There's no contract. It's similar to early action, where you get to get a decision and sort of hold on to it. Early decision 2 is exactly like early decision 1. It's a little bit of a later deadline. You don't have to apply until, let's say, December, and the deadline for early decision 2 is in January. Not every school will offer early decision 2. So we have to be sure that we are aware. And if you work with a bespoke counselor, we will help you understand which schools offer these options and which ones don't. And then regular decision is sort of a catch-all. This is where nearly most students will apply at some point, unless they got in early decision 1. Most students will apply regular decision to a batch of schools. And this is where you find nearly every student in the pool in regular decision.
Thanks, Antoine. So we're going to be dealing with a lot of these terms as we go on, talking about benefits and drawbacks, et cetera. But there's more to get the lay of the land before we jump into some of these questions and answers. So Sarah, if you will, please talk us through what can happen after these admissions, after the early deadlines, after the regular deadlines. What is the scope?
Great. So I'll talk about possible outcomes for early first. So first, obviously admitted. So you send in your application and get admitted. If it's ED, you then withdraw all your other applications. You send in your deposit, start buying your school sweatshirts. You're good to go. The second possibility is a deny. So an outright deny, in which we're very keen. It's not rejected. It's not that they're rejecting you as a person or anything like that, that it's just denied for whatever reason. The third option for the early pool is that you could be deferred to their regular decision pool. And that can happen for a number of reasons. So what that means is that they're saying, we're not ready to make a decision on your application yet. We're going to move you automatically right over to our regular decision application pool and re-review your application. Sometimes that's because they want to see your application in the context of a larger context of the students who apply regular decision. They might need more information on your grades. They might have some questions about things. So there are various reasons why that might happen. And then waitlisted could happen. I haven't really seen that personally with any of my students from early pools, but that obviously something that could happen with regular decision. And if a student is deferred, especially if you're working with the bespoke counselor, then there's a process through that we can help you with. So, you can send in letters reiterating your interest to that school, send them updates on, changes to your grades or changes to your extracurricular activities or any honors that you've gotten. So that's something that we can help students craft. Much like if students are waitlisted, we can also help with similar things in that, adding things to your application and waitlist letter, things like that. So those are really the main outcomes that can happen from early and then onto regular.
Great. Thank you both. So we've got a lot of juniors, a lot of seniors in the audience here. Welcome, everyone. We are at the moment. This is happening. The early deadlines are less than a month away. So for anyone who's kind of looking at the next 2-3 months to get themselves through to the middle of January when everything is finally in, how do you lay out that timeline to your clients, to the parents that call you with their questions?
So excellent question. And so right now, Sarah and I are right in the thick of it with our seniors. We've worked with them. And one of the first things we want to make sure, especially if a student or a family was to start with us now, is to sort of figure out where they are, how much of the application have they gotten done. But once we get past that, we get into strategy on where you're going to apply, why, and what are the deadline dates. So again, if it's rolling admissions, if it's early decision, if it's early action, we sort of strategize a plan around that. We make sure we don't miss any deadlines, and you can see the deadlines there for each of the different options for applying to college. If financial aid is a consideration, right now, the financial aid forms are online and ready to be filled out by the families. I encourage families to fill them out with the students. And so we would first work with students to meet this first November deadline. There are some outliers. University of Chapel Hill has an October 15th deadline, but we would make sure we meet all of these deadlines for the students for early decisions starting November 1st and November 15th. I encourage everyone to sort of get those applications in early. Right after those applications go out, we immediately start looking at Plan B. Is Plan B to apply early decision 2, or is Plan B to go directly into regular decision? If it's early decision 2, where are we applying? All right, if it's regular decision, what are those colleges? What do they look like? How many schools are we applying to? And so we will map that out immediately so that we all know what the plan is, what the deadlines are, which colleges we're applying to, so that we don't make any mistakes and miss any deadlines.
Thank you. So here's a sense of, oh, sorry, Sarah.
Yeah, let me pick up also just, I agree with all of that. And I want to also just add, just to make sure it's clear that those early decisions will come back in December. There's some outliers in terms of when exactly in December, but so that gives students time to, maybe make some changes if there are other schools they want to apply regular. But I also am talking to my families now about, don't wait to get that decision in order to start working on your regular, those Plan B and Plan C, since there's so much writing that goes on with that too, that's something that I also would talk my students through right now in terms of that timeline of what they're looking at those next couple months.
And I can imagine there's one parent that's thinking, can I apply ED1 and ED2? The answer is yes. You apply ED1, as Sarah mentioned, you get your decision within the first 2 weeks of December. If it's a deny, not a rejection, if it's a deny, you can then apply ED2. And then you can apply regular decision while you're waiting for your ED2 decision. So there's options there.
So my first question, kind of digging into this, but also the umbrella question, or let's say to get us kicked off, is should a student apply early to begin with? How do you approach that when families come to you with that?
I usually, with families, that if you're applying to college, I recommend apply early. That doesn't necessarily mean apply early decision, because there is that binding piece of it. So sometimes students aren't ready to make that commitment, or financial aid might become a consideration there. But for early action schools, especially, because you are still able to wait and make your final decision about which acceptances you accept down the line, I always recommend it, partly because students get those applications in early. It takes a lot off of your shoulders for your fall semester. Getting those responses back early just feels great. It removes some of the uncertainty that can make this process hard. And then it also removes some uncertainty from the college point of view. So they're getting to see this batch of students who they know are interested in their school, they know are likely to attend or are committed to attend if it's early decisions. So, I recommend it for sure.
Yeah. And Sarah's 100% correct. These colleges are businesses, and they need students they need to know they're going to fill their class. The only thing worse than over-enrolling meaning you need a class of 1,000, you bring in a class of 500, 1,500, you're 500 over. That's tough. But really the biggest problem is finding a place for all those 500 students to live and sleep. But if you under-enroll, that's a loss of revenue. And you're paying professors whether they have a full class or no one in the class. And so they're really trying to hit those target numbers. They will use ED or early as an option to sort of fill those classes. And I'll share some statistics really quickly. Tulane last year, 2/3 of their class was filled in early. Brown and Yale, roughly 50% of their class was filled in early. I remember a couple of years ago, there was one college that was popular with my students. They did offer ED1 and ED2. By the time they got through those early rounds, they only had 50 spots in regular decision for the tens of thousands of students that were applying. And so you can definitely see how we certainly encourage students to apply someplace early. If you're not ready to commit and apply ED, then are there rolling or early action colleges that we can sort of apply to so that we get those apps out the door? Then just one more piece, Dan, there's a mental health piece to this that I'm always concerned about. And that is, in this day and age, I'm old, I'm bald, I'm graying, you can't see it here, but you know, there was no internet when I applied. Now everyone has these social media platforms where they can share their decisions and talk to other students. And it's really hard on students when they look around and it feels like everyone got into school and everyone got into their top school. It's not always true, but we certainly encourage students like, hey, let's have some early action schools where we know you're going to get admitted so that you have that in your back pocket. These are colleges that you've chosen. If you get into your early ED school, great. If you don't, you walk out of the early process with a college under your belt as you continue applying to other schools.
Thank you. So let's talk numbers, just to give us a sense, to give our listeners a sense of what is quote unquote normal. I know that's very hard to pin down, but a typical student, a typical applicant, how many schools are they applying to in this early round if they've chosen to apply early at all? Sarah, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. And this is an answer you'll hear a lot in any college conversation. It depends. So,
Yeah,
you know, I have some
that
students.
was the subtitle of our webinar going in today.
Yes, yeah. You know, so I have one of my students, for instance, who just so happens to not have any schools on his list that offer early options. He has one school he's doing ED, but then the others just don't offer early action. It's just sort of how the cookie crumbled, you know, this time around. On average, I would say most of my students are doing 4 to 5 schools. And so within that, obviously only one early decision, if any, and then the rest are early action schools. And the early action schools, those are not just reach schools. So I always encourage my students that, you know what, if you have a school that is a likely school or a target school that offers early action, still take advantage of that. Send that application in, get that response back. But there's no reason to hold off on that.
And I agree with Sarah. It's good to know that the Common App, the Common Application, which most students will use, only allows for a student to apply to 20 schools. And 5 to 6 is a good number for the early round. You don't want to have a student applying to 14 schools early and they're only left with 6 slots in the regular decision. And so it's important that we try to keep that in mind. But we also, when you work with a bespoke council, we're trying to be really strategic. We want to have a balanced list of schools that the student loves, but also we want to make sure that there are colleges on there where we're pretty certain that they're going to receive positive information from them. And so if we can get that in early, you know, it sort of puts a little relief in the student's mind that, hey, this all worked out, everything's going well, and we're in a good space right now.
Cool. So then let's talk about targeting, because this is something, obviously it depends as well, but it would be great to hear some of your nuances. Where does the student's first pick fall? Is it always, if they're ED, then you apply to your first pick ED, or do you see some variety along those lines?
I would say you see variety. I would offer that, you know, some students will say, hey, my top choice school happens to be an ED school. And so that's the route I'm going to go. If their top choice school, I actually have a student right now I'm working with, his top choice school actually is EA. And so that's the route he wants to go. And he's going to apply to multiple schools. But I think there is no rule, no hard rule in all of this. I think the rule is we figure out where your top choice school is. We put an application out to them and we look around and say, where else can we apply on your list? Like what other schools on your list sort of fit in without breaking any of those early application rules of ED versus EA versus restrictive early action.
I sometimes will say to my students that, well, it also sort of depends on your appetite for risk. Do you really want to use that ED for your reach school, and that you just will always be wondering, what if I had done that? And are they comfortable with, if that happens and then they're unable to have taken advantage of that for more of a target school, that, you know, how will they feel about that? So it really is a decision that we can help our students think about, but that it is something that we're always empowering the student that they need to make that choice themselves.
Yeah, I often get students that will say, hey, I want to apply, I want to be admitted and just be a senior. I want to buy my swag, and by the time the winter holidays roll around, I know where I'm going and I'm set. And I think that's also important for the students to make that decision and the families to make that decision for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Right. So then digging into this, a question on everyone's mind is, how does it help, or does it help? Does applying early, or does applying early action or early decision, does it change my chances of getting in? What do you guys got?
I think we might be in disagreement with some of the admissions officers and some of the information they give, because they would say, it doesn't make a huge difference. And I think what they mean by that most of the time is that they're not going to lower their academic profile of the student they're interested in. That's not going to change. They're still going to look for the students that are the best fit academically, that are going to be successful academically. So that won't change. However, as I stated with the statistics I gave you, they are clearly using this to fill their class, to determine and really be able to nail down how many students are going to show up, maybe to fill in those financial coffers that they had to sort of get the money coming in. And so what you're going to see, and you could probably find articles online, I could share them, where a lot of these colleges are sort of trying to fill up their class, 50% of their class in the early rounds. And so it's important to keep that in mind, is that the benefit is that they're trying to fill those classes, and your best chance of being admitted is in those early rounds, especially since they haven't read an application yet. You are in that first group of students to be read. And so why not be in that first group where they don't have anyone to compare you to yet? But also by signing that ED agreement, you are confirming that they are your top choice school.
Yeah, well, 100%. And I think, and it goes back to the idea of removing uncertainty, that I think that's a big benefit of it. It removes that uncertainty for the college. Will this student accept my acceptance? That's part of why when you're working with counselors, we'll talk a lot about really knowing the school when you're answering those why here questions, because the school's trying to understand, will you come here if we admit you? And so ED especially takes away some of that uncertainty from their point of view. And then the uncertainty, again, kind of that we've been talking about for the student of, am I going to get in someplace, and where am I going to go? That getting that big batch of early decisions back sooner takes away that uncertainty, which is another benefit. So yeah, absolutely.
What about ED2? Does that have any increased chance, or this quote unquote increased chance, or is there any way to tell that?
It's sort of similar in the sense that, again, because it's a binding decision, that they know then, okay, this student that I'm reading, with the regular decision pool is going to accept our acceptance. So that does give a bump in that sense. The statistics on that's a little harder to track down, partly because they will often bundle the numbers on ED2 with just their overall early decision statistics. So it's a little bit harder to suss out. So there is an increase. I don't think it's quite as big of an advantage as the early decision one and early action, but absolutely it does give you a little bit more of a bump there.
And keep in mind, not every college will offer ED2, so you're
Right.
limited in the colleges that have that option. They also get that, it's possible that the student applied ED1 somewhere. They're happy to catch that second round of students who are willing to commit. And some families may have a 1A and a 1B, and how do you pick one? And so alternatively, you pick one to apply ED1 and you are prepared to go ED2. So there's a lot of different sort of strategies that families can use, but ultimately you're still signing a contract, you're still signing a binding contract that says you're going to attend. And so for the colleges, as Sarah mentioned, that gives them some comfort in knowing that those students are going to show up on campus.
Are there any drawbacks to applying early, either ED or EA? Are there any reasons one would choose not to do it?
I think one of the biggest ones is, especially for early decision, because it's binding, is that sometimes students just really are not ready to commit to a school yet. They just don't know if this is actually the place that is the best fit for me. So that's certainly one reason. Financial aid would be another reason, again, for that early decision, especially that sometimes students and families need to wait to be able to compare all of their financial aid packages. So early action's a better route for that. Though, of course, if you apply ED and the financial aid package they give you doesn't cut it, no school is going to force you to attend for that. That would be the reason to be able to get out of that binding contract. But so those are, I would say, probably the two biggest reasons why students might not want to do an early approach.
And I would just add, I 100% agree with Sarah. The only thing I would add is there is zero reason why a family or a student should not apply rolling or early action.
Yeah.
There's nothing that you should apply. If there's a school on your list that you love that is early action or rolling admissions, absolutely apply, because you're not committed to go. You're going to get the financial aid package. You're going to be able to review that. You can continue to apply to other colleges. And so it's just, there's no drawback to applying EA or rolling.
What about senior fall grades? Like if I'm doing great and I know my grades for senior fall are going to put the cherry on top of the cake in terms of now this guy has all the grades that he needs, would there be a reason to wait or to push back to regular just so those grades get included?
So sorry, I guess I'll jump in. No, I think the only reason why you would want to wait is if there's no reason to wait. If you know you're going to get the grades and the grades are going to come in, awesome. But not all colleges will accept those fall senior grades. There's some colleges that are so big, they receive so many applications that they're going to start reading from junior year or from freshman year to junior year, and they're going to take whatever they have in hand at that moment. They can't wait. A lot of high schools, the grades don't come out until mid to late November, and by then they have to have already gone through a lot of these applications. But those grades do count. They're very important. In fact, if the college will accept them, whether it's in early or in regular, it's going to really show at that moment. The most recent grades are going to show whether you're prepared for college. It's also going to sort of answer some questions on whether you're on an upward trend, a downward trend, if you're doing this zigzag thing where you're up and down. I always talk to my students and say, if you get deferred, first of all, it's not a loss because they could have denied you. So there's something about your application that they loved, but there may be a question about grades. And so if you get deferred, I had a student where I told her, I said, you were a straight A student and all of a sudden senior fall, you got B's. And that was a concern from the colleges. Like, now you're on this downward trend. If you can, in winter term, turn that around, and she ended up getting straight A's and ended up getting admitted. I said, you'll get admitted. That's the only question on your application. And so those grades are vital. Senior fall is vital. Don't take the gas off the pedal. There's no reason to let up at this point. They want to know the students are prepared and mature and ready for college, and the grades on that senior fall are the sort of like the last grades they can receive. But also, and if you understand what I'm saying, junior spring is also important because for some colleges, those are the last grades they'll receive.
That makes sense. So let's talk now about sort of what do students need to have in place? I'm curious, we've got a slide on this, but if a family comes to you at any point, I know we never say you're behind because we've seen it all, including the person who comes to us the day before everything is due and has nothing done. So there's no behind, but what do you talk to students and families about? What do they need to have in place at this moment or around this moment in the process?
So one of the things I always speak with my families about is there are 5 things I'm always looking for. And no matter how many times I meet with a family, and if any of my families are listening to this, they'll confirm this. I always ask over and over and over, even if I know the answer in case something changes, have you gotten your SAT scores? Have you taken the exam, or are you test optional? Like, what do you have right now? Because this will sort of help us in where you're going to apply. Have you written your essay, your personal statement? If you're working with a bespoke counselor, you've probably drafted something. If you haven't drafted something, let's get you with a bespoke tutor so that we can get that essay written and ready to go. You need 2 letters of recommendations, 2 academic letters of recommendations. Some colleges will accept 1, others will accept an additional rec. And I usually tell my families, pick someone from outside the school, a community service project, an internship, a job, or something like that, but 2 academic recommendations. Then there would be the Common App. Have you completed the Common Application? That goes live in August. Have you gone in and answered the questions? Your name, your address, where your parents went to school, your activities, your honors and awards, et cetera, et cetera. That is the actual application. My families, I will email that first week of August and say, hey, the Common App is live. Jump in, answer those questions. And then, of course, the college list. We need to know where you're applying. As a bespoke counselor, we will work with the students to figure out these 5 things. If there are any questions for any of the families, we have webinars on some of these topics. You can certainly jump in on our YouTube channel and check them out. There are things that the student is not responsible for. A student is responsible for asking teachers for recommendations, but that's it. Once that's done, it's off their plate. The colleges will send the transcripts. The students don't have to worry about that. So constantly going over and over and over and sort of asking these questions to make sure these things get done. If we can get these 5 things done, we are ready to apply.
And something else I often will talk to my students about around this time of year is that also is, I'll use the Common App, as the example. Most applications are on there. Some are not, but most are. That once they get that first ED application completed, it is so much easier from there for all of them, because then the only thing that they're having to do for their other early applications, for their regular decisions, all those plan B and C that we come up with, is any supplements that they might have. So once they get past that first big hill of getting that first application out, it snowballs, their shoulders lighten, it just gets easier from there too. So that's something else I'm talking to my students about right now, because they're almost there with that first one being done, and then things just get easier from there.
And Dan, you sort of asked the question about, trying to get these things done, even if they show up today. If we start in their junior or freshman, sophomore year, we have a lot of time to get these things together. If they start right now, everything is still due. We just have less time to do it. And so we might spend more time with those students to get these things done quickly, especially if they have a November 1st deadline for their colleges. It's possible. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a commitment from the student and maybe some management from the family to make sure they're not playing on the Xbox, but they're so focused on getting this essay done. But it is possible. It's never impossible. It's just a question of how much time can they dedicate in a short period of time. It's for these early round of applications.
Yeah, 100%. And some schools also don't ask for supplements. So sometimes that also is an easier one to add for EA, because you don't have as much the extra that you have to do. Yeah.
Right. Is there any special strategy for ED2 in terms of what you choose, what you put at the top of that list? Or is it more like see what happens in ED and EA and then shuffle downwards from there?
Yeah, I'd like to see what happens with, well, we would have already made a plan for ED2. So as you're applying ED1 or early, whatever November 1st deadline you have, we would already decided, hey, if-then statements. If you've ever written computer programs, there are lots of if-then statements. I remember the Commodore 64, I would write pages and pages in the notebook of code, and then I would have a comma in the wrong place. But if-then statement, if I get in ED, then I'm done. If I don't get in ED, then my plan is to apply ED2. Now, that ED2 may be determined by those early action schools. Their second top school might be an early action school. So it's great. They're applying to their top school ED and their number 2 school EA, and they're going to get both decisions. If they get into their number 2 school, they may decide they're done. But if their number 2 school offers ED2 and their number 3 is EA, then we'll go ED2, see what happens, knowing that they have the EA in the back pocket. So those are strategies we'll work on ahead of time. As I mentioned earlier, the minute we get past these November deadlines and we get those first batch of applications out, we jump right into that ED2. And if it's not ED2, we jump right into regular decision, because what we don't want is a student home for the holidays trying to figure out where to apply, trying to write essays, trying to write supplements, trying to figure out deadlines. We want to have all of that planned out already, so that really the student is sitting at home waiting to press the button. He's going to get a decision. If it's an admit, awesome. I'm going to tell these other schools I'm not going to their school. If he gets a denial, he just pushes the button or she pushes the button and off it goes, and they don't have any extra work to do.
That makes a lot of sense. What about if an essay is incomplete, or if a student is struggling to get the right touch on their personal statement for the Common App? Would that be a case where you hold off on applying early if you feel like the application isn't quite where you want it to be?
I would say this goes back to it depends. Just to see what exactly is the concern with that essay? What are the schools that student is looking to apply to early? That sort of, where does it fall? That I think that would be something that you'd want to look at, again, the whole picture of the application. But to say that, I have a student, for instance, who wants to hold off to do ED2 to get a portfolio ready for that specific school. And they're a great candidate for that school. They've got a great shot. So holding off to ED2, that's a great strategy to get that other piece done. So from my point of view, I'd say that would be an it depends question. But Antoine, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think more than anything, we want the student happy with their application. We want them to feel like, hey, I put a lot of work into this. It's high quality and I'm ready to go. And if I'm not ready to go, first of all, we still have time. And so we'll work with the student to sort of figure out why they feel like it's not quite ready. Maybe there's a sentence they can't quite get right. Maybe there's a quote that they're trying to pull out and they can't get it quite right. We'll work with those students. Those are, I wouldn't say easy, because we're sort of trying to get the students' vision into their essay, but we will work with them as best we can to try to make sure we meet those deadlines. This, when you're applying to international schools, it may be a little bit different. The international schools pre-COVID, they didn't care too much about the essay. They're mostly really worried about the testing and the scores and all those things. Since COVID started, they've had to read a lot more essays. In fact, recently in a conference I attended, they shared, like, we see the value in that. We see the value in understanding who the student is, their passions, their interests, their writing style, and understanding what that means to the student. And so for us, if the student is not quite happy and not quite ready to submit, then we'll work with them to try and get there. And if we can't get there, I think the best thing is to hold off. What we don't want to do with the student to do is to go through the process, and then they sort of feel like I didn't put my best foot forward, and that's why I got denied. We want to make sure it's a quality product when they apply.
100%. And is it that they feel that it's not ready, or is it actually not ready? So sort of helping the student, that is this actually just getting through an anxiety moment of it, or is it actually right? We have got more crafting to do. And so I think that that's part of that conversation also. Yeah.
And by the way, Dan, we're rolling out services. I'm sure you're going to talk about this later, where if they're not quite there and they just need some feedback, like, we have services that will allow them to have 2 or 3 tutors and counselors review it for them. And maybe, and sometimes it's, I just need confirmation. I need validation from someone. We all know that if I write a paper or I read an essay, if I read it enough times, you may not see things that someone with a fresh pair of eyes may see. And so we have these services where we could share this with other professionals within Bespoke. Isn't this great? We have everything in-house for these families that we can share this with other colleagues, get honest feedback. They don't know the student, they're just reading the essay. And then the student can get feedback. And if there's any tweaks or changes or concerns, they'll get that firsthand. But then they may get back and say, this is awesome. Like, this is an amazing essay. I learned a lot about you. Let's go for it. And that will validate the student in saying that it's ready to go. It'll confirm that it's ready to be submitted.
Yeah, just getting past some of those blind spots.
Mhm.
So let's dig into the timelines. I want to talk about this from the perspective of each of our groups of audience members. You're not behind. First off, we're going to break it down. We're going to move pretty quickly through 9th and 10th grade because we don't have too many of the younger grade students here. I'll kick us off. We call 9th and 10th grade exploration. This is a time when there is some leeway, and students should take advantage of that to really find out what they like, find out what makes them tick or what they're interested in. But at the foundation of that, they should be working hard, and they should be developing their good habits and finding out where they might need to improve. That if there is a weakness in math or a weakness in reading or a weakness in English class, now is the time to work on it. Schools accepting you for college really do look at a trajectory in your grades, and they want to see generally a positive trajectory. So bad grades in 9th grade are not necessarily going to sink the ship, but the schools have got to see better grades after that. They want to see the improvement. They want to see some effort, some dedication to correct the thing that happened earlier. And at the core of that is reading. I can't stress this enough. For the standardized tests, for interviews, for writing your essays, the core skill is reading and verbal fluency, because that even helps you read math questions better. So having that as a strong foundation is really key. Start your test prep in the spring of 10th grade. If you want to address it before that time, think about where your grades could use some support, because the math that you're doing in 9th and 10th is going to feed right into the SAT and ACT. Same for the reading, same for the writing. Antoine, Sarah, anything to add to 9th grade before we move on to junior year?
I think you nailed it. I think the biggest thing is exploration, is just try new things. Go to some things that seem interesting to you. You're sort of trying to figure out, where you want to go with this, and maybe there's an interest in a particular major, and you want to join the robotics team or try it out. It's just try. Step out of your comfort zone and give these things a try. Now is the time to do that. But as Dan alluded to, the most important thing is to sort of work hard in the classroom, because these grades count.
Mm-hmm.
So then junior year. Antoine, do you want to, I know, Sarah, why don't you take this?
Sure. So junior year preparation, this is probably the most important year of your high school career, especially in terms of your academics. So that is the biggest focus, is do well academically. And, you know, as we spoke about before, schools might get to see some of your senior fall semester grades, but they might not. So this is really the last year that they're going to see, what is your transcript like? What are your grade trends looking like? And there's usually a big shift, like a gear shift in the rigor that happens within the school. And so those grades give schools a better sense of how you will fare in college level classes. So cannot emphasize enough, this is the year to get a tutor if there's a subject that you're struggling in. This is the year to go and talk to your teachers, go to their office hours, get to know them, be honest with them about the stuff you're struggling with, get help where you can in school if you need to. And the other benefit of that is also forming closer relationships with your teachers. It's your junior and senior year where you'll get those letters of recommendation from your core subjects. And so start forming closer relationships with your teachers. Again, asking them for help. Sometimes the best letters of recommendation come from a teacher who says, you know what? I had the student who was struggling in math. They only got their grade from a B to a B+, but let me tell you how hard they worked to do that. That is a great thing that schools will want to see, is what are you like in the classroom? So can't emphasize that enough. Secondly, keep looking for opportunities for making an impact on your community through either the clubs that you're doing, activities that you're doing. You know, leadership is great if you have those opportunities and can find them, but you can be a leader without having the title of president. So what are ways within the activities you're already engaged and excited about to head that fundraiser, get more members, have an impact on your community? There's a lot of stuff like that that you'll be talking about in your application as well. Of course, test prep, mock testing. This is another, big shift that starts to happen. This is when you'd want to start focusing on your testing. And then the other thing is start going to visit schools. You can't know what you don't know about colleges and college visits until you show up and start hearing things from info sessions, meeting students on campus. Even if it's a school you're not sure you want to go to or not, just go take a tour and take a journal. I really start to encourage my students around this time, if I'm trying to work with a junior around now, to take notes on everything. What did I like about the school? What didn't I like? What was a surprise? What were the questions that I had? Some of those schools start to bleed together the longer you start visiting, because they're all, talking about the sort of similar qualities. So the more notes that you have, the better prepped you'll be for those why here questions down the line. And then I'll toss this next bit over to Antoine, actually, because he's our athletics expert. I always like to hear him talk about it too.
So
It's fascinating.
in preparation, I think one of the things that's important for the families to recognize is that a lot of the things that students are going to do in the college process, they're already doing in the classroom. So when we're talking about self-reflection, we're talking about, hey, can you do research? Can you be a self-advocate? Can you be independent? Like, what are those things that you've done that are going to translate well into the college process? And most students have done those things. But now you've decided on what you want to do, and let's sort of like jump in with both feet as a junior, and let's do this for a couple of years. If it's robotics, make sure you've done it for a couple of years. But then there's athletic recruiting. And this is not the student that's being actively recruited. Like everyone, Division I school is recruiting Antoine Hart to play basketball. I wish didn't happen. I had a few here and there, but those students already have options and they have to pick and choose. We're talking about those Division III volleyball players who need to reach out to coaches, who need to stand out in some of these tournaments, who need to be available in camps, who sort of need to self-recruit is what I like to call it. As a coach, and I used to recruit students, it was hard to go out to these high schools and these showcases and sort of introduce myself and try to encourage and sell my school and sell me as a coach. If you're sitting in your office and an athlete walks in and they say, hey, I love your school, I love to come and play for you, and they're 6'1" and they play volleyball, like that's easy for me to sort of look at them and say, I would love to have you on my volleyball team. You can't teach height, right? So you have someone that walks right in the door. And so those are great. So we work with students to sort of craft those letters to coaches, to sort of give them guidance on where to go and where to be seen and how to be seen. We also help them to understand, like, they are still a student applying to college. So all the testing, the essays, all of that is still standard. And so that's still important for the colleges to review. One last thing, coaches can love you, but admissions has the final decision. A coach could tell you, I love you and I want you, and admissions could still deny. So you still have to pass those tests. You still have to get your application through the admissions office. Recruiting helps, but it's not the end all to be all. It doesn't mean you're absolutely in.
Then let's move on to the year of action, which is senior fall, where many of you are right now. Got just a few weeks left. For seniors at this moment, what are some of the things that you're reminding them of, making sure that they've got on their list, making sure that they've checked off? Sarah, do you want to tackle this first?
Sure. So at this point, similar to things we've been saying, that they should already have their list. We should, especially if they're working with a counselor at Bespoke, that we've talked through strategy. And so at this point, it's really finishing writing, focusing on those supplements. Schools really consider those supplements when they're looking at your applications. And I always encourage my students to not shortchange the time that you're spending writing those, that sometimes you can get caught up in focusing so much on just your Common App essay, the personal statement, that students, you don't want to then be quick writing your final supplement without having spent the same level of thought into that. Because that's where you're getting into those school specific things. Why this school? Why this program? Let me talk about, the specifics about why I'm coming to you with my interest. Finalizing teacher letters of recommendation, making sure that you've requested those. We've talked through the strategy about those. If students are applying to schools that have an honors college that they're interested in, making sure that they've looked to see what additional things might be required for that. Sometimes there's additional writing that doesn't show up until you've selected that in the drop-down menu on Common Application, and then it's populated with more writing questions that you didn't know you had to do. So making sure students are working on that. And then just getting them prepped to send their applications along, as well as then interviews, which comes up afterwards. I wonder if Antoine, do you want to talk about the interview process?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, wonderful that Bespoke Education has this in-house, right? We have counselors that can do a mock interview with students. They'll have roughly 3 sessions where they'll run them through some exercises. They'll sort of highlight and summarize what the colleges are looking for, and then they'll have a real mock interview. We all know that the more you do something, the more comfortable you get with it. I am terrible at webinars, but I know if Dan keeps putting me out here, I'm going to get better and better and better at them. And so having a mock interview is incredibly helpful to the students. And so that when they walk into a real interview, they are prepared. They know what to ask for. They know what to look for. Everything is set. I would also go back to sort of the mock testing. It's the same thing. Like mock test. Again, Bespoke Education, we have this in-house. Like the more comfortable the students get with the questions, the more comfortable they get with the time, with the process, the easier the test will be for them, because they won't be worried about the nuances of the exam. And one quick note, Dan, if it's okay, with teacher recommendations, it's highly recommended by the colleges that the students choose someone that has taught them junior or senior year. Some colleges will absolutely put it on their website. And the reason why is who that student was freshman year as a scholar may be very different from who they are as a junior or a senior. So this is the reason why we ask students to start thinking about those teachers in junior spring, because they want junior or senior year teachers that have taught the student, not freshman and sophomore.
Very much so. Thank you. So now would be a great time for questions. If people have any lingering questions while we wait and see if some of those come in. I am going to take a moment to talk about some of the products we've touched on. Sarah, can you talk us through the hourly model? Antoine, can you talk us through the package model? And then we'll just dance around a couple of these things that we've already spent a little time talking about.
Sure. So the hourly model, I think this goes back to the bespokeness of the college counseling at Bespoke. So that really is, that can look like ad hoc meetings, just where students want to come in with a couple questions. They want just a quick review on a college list. That's a great model to use for students who want to just gotten deferred, say, so they want to talk about their deferral process or a wait list process, or if they just have questions about, they're feeling really self-driven, they want to just meet with us a couple times here and there, that it's really when we can tailor that process to exactly what the student and the family needs, and that offers a lot of flexibility in that regard.
And with the packages, this is more of a, hey, I want someone to oversee the entire process for my student. I want to make sure they're meeting their deadlines. I want to make sure they're getting all the parts of the application completed. We need a little bit more hand-holding. We want more frequent meetings. Maybe it's a meeting a week or a meeting every 2 weeks or once a month, depending on what the student needs. But I want to make sure someone's checking in on my student to make sure they're meeting their obligations. But also with the packages, and really with hourly or the packages, what we try to do is we really try to educate the family as much as possible on the entire process and any changes that we see and any nuances of applying to various colleges. No 2 colleges are alike. And so understanding the nuances of those schools is very important. And we spoke about the sample interviews and about mock interviews and being prepared. I encourage students, when I worked in admissions, I would tell families, if your student is good at interviews, interview. If they're not good at interviews, don't interview. It can actually hurt your application. So this is important information. But if you're concerned, allow us to do some mock interviews with that student so we can prepare them. Quick note on interviews, some colleges offer them, some don't. I think there are, if my knowledge is correct, there are about 66 colleges that offer interviews in various forms. Some of them will say, you apply, we'll reach out to you. We'll contact you, don't contact us. Not everyone will get one. Some of them will have a window. November is a huge window to get interviews. And they will say, you need to sign up, contact us, let us know you want an interview. And then there are schools that don't interview at all. But we offer the opportunity to sort of mock interview students so they're prepared for those interviews.
Yeah. And then the last piece of the puzzle that we've talked about quite a lot is the college essays. The personal statement for the Common App and then the supplemental statements, any of those, we are there to work on them. We are a fairly hands-off company, by which I will say very clearly, we're not writing the essay for the student. We don't go there. What we do is work sort of soup to nuts, brainstorming, coaching, pointing them towards options that may be more interesting than others. For example, you don't want to talk about death and disease typically in your essays. It's just better to stay away from those topics. So some of that sort of wisdom of the ages to help guide the process and help point it in the right direction. Our philosophy is, and Sarah and Antoine can attest to this, is that the schools really do want to hear from the student in their own voice. They don't want the most polished, most grammatically perfect, professionally written essay, because those are all going to blend together. And also, they're not really going to represent the student. That doesn't mean that your essay should be full of grammatical errors and full of typos if that's how your student writes. So there is a balance there. It's something to think about as you're helping support your students to compose these statements. And then lastly,
Dan,
Antoine touched on this.
Jump in
Oh, yeah, please.
I will tell you, I just want to share with the families that when I started with Bespoke, I went through the sort of essay exercises and training just so I could see what it was like. And the essay I came up with was nothing that I thought I would have come up with just going through the exercises. So I was impressed by first impression, and I've had years of experience of reading and working with students on essays. And so there's definitely value in working with those tutors.
Yeah. And the tutors are tutors who have been on admissions committees, who have read these essays for schools. There's a lot of expertise and a great wealth of that. And then lastly, the College Essay Roundtable, which Antoine spoke about, is where we get your essay in whatever stage it is, and mindful of the time frame that you've got, we get it in front of 3 of our experts who then read it and critique it, and then confab to present the set of constructive criticisms that are going to be helpful for that essay on that time frame. So for example, if we know there are 3 weeks left, that is not the time to dismantle the essay and reconstruct it from the ground up. That is a time for targeted, helpful things, little tweaks that a student or a family can make to help expose or to get over the blind spot that you may not be thinking about. So it's a really neat service. We're going to be emailing to follow up after today with more details on that and a special offer, and also the recording for today. And that's sort of where we'll close before closing comments from Sarah and Antoine, which is just to say that we are a word of mouth company. So if you liked what you hear today, liked what you heard, please do recommend us to your friends and family. The webinars are always free. We're trying to get really helpful, actionable, useful information out there because we've been doing this for 20 plus years and we have a lot of expertise. The first phone calls with our directors are free. They are extensive. They've been answering those calls for years and we want to help out. So please do give us a call, even if you have no intention of tutoring. We've got a lot of information, a lot of questions that we can answer. And now, Antoine, Sarah, I'll hand it over to you for any closing remarks that you'd like to share with our guests.
Sure. So I would probably say to the families that this is a huge decision for your students. This is probably, in their eyes, the largest purchase they're going to make to date. I know parents are paying for it, but you understand what I mean. The students are making this decision, and we work with the students to find the right match. And what I mean by that is, if you're house shopping, there isn't one house on the planet that's right for you. You could probably find thousands of houses. And similarly, with colleges, there are a lot of colleges that will sort of fit what that student is looking for. We are here to help them find the right match. We are here to support them. We are here to guide them. We are here to sort of give them advice in this process so they're not alone in this process. We are here to help in any capacity they need, but also understand that we're trying to find the right match for that student where they'll be happy, they'll be successful, they'll make tons of friends and incredible memories for the long term. And so I encourage you, if you have any questions, to reach out to us. And while I have this opportunity, I want to say thank you for joining us today. It's been incredibly fun. This was live, so if there were mistakes that were made in me talking over Dan a little bit, I apologize. It wasn't intentional. But I would say Bespoke Education is here to help the student to bring out the best in those students and to find the right match and support them in this college process.
100%. And, you know, and we know this is a huge life event that families and students are inviting us into. And I think, you know, I always feel so honored by that, you know, that's something that we're being asked to take part in. And we really take that very seriously. And, you know, we love talking to each other about all of these things. So we love talking to your students about this. You know, I think, you know, these puzzles can be really fun to put together. I know that sometimes students don't feel that way, but I always feel that way. So, you know, come to us. We'll help them sort of see the bright side when they're struggling and just get as excited as they do about finding those schools that are the best fit. So yes, and to reiterate, thank you all so much for being here. We look forward to hopefully hearing from you more, having you join the Bespoke family.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night. If we didn't get to your questions, or if you've got lingering questions, please do reach out. Our contact information is in the chat, and we look forward to hearing from you. We will give you an answer via some other medium. So thank you very much and have a wonderful night.